Fight!
Knightmare for the MSX is a vertical shooter released by Konami in 1986. It's fair to say that it's probably Konami's most iconic game on the platform. The game was an unusual departure by Konami from one-screen platformers or space shooters or even sport titles. You see, for those who, unlike me, weren't there at the time, May 85 saw the release of a rather successful game called Commando. The game was hugely popular and prompted a growing fashion for a number of Commando clones and ground-based vertical shooters like Ikari Warriors or even Konami's own Jackal in later years. The MSX didn't escape this fad and saw its own port of Commando by Capcom in 1987. It's not a terrible game, it's just... well, it's... no, right the first time. It's a terrible game. I mean, look at that. It's... and it's rare, so you'll have to pay a small fortune if you want it. Infogrames also tried its hand at a Commando-like on the MSX2 called TNT. The music and graphics were quite good, bearing Infogrames' stylistic trademark, but the game itself was slow, poor, and uninteresting. I actually bought the game back then. I still remember it now. I had a copy of Metal Gear in one hand and TNT in the other, and I took TNT. Yeah. So, Knightmare. The game was Konami's attempt at an early Commando-like for the platform, as Commando wouldn't be ported until the next year on the MSX, and with that genre gap on the system, Konami must have been keen on hopping on the Commando train. Some vertical shooters existed, but nothing with the scale and sense of epicness. Is that a word? Yeah? Epicness? Yeah. That Knightmare had. So what set it apart from other shooters? Well, the game had strong undertones of ancient Greece. Well, more than strong, in fact. It's actually in the manual. Line 2. We are back in Greek mythology. So... yeah. Anyway, you play as Knight Popolon, who's just woken up from a dream in which Hera, the wife and sister of Zeus, instructed him to go to the Knightmare castle of the king of the underworld on the slopes of Mount Athos to rescue his beloved Aphrodite, who incidentally is the goddess of love. I find it interesting that the name for the main character is Popolon, as it's very close to the god Apollo. The reason I find it interesting is because Apollo and Aphrodite are among the very few Greek gods that never became lover at any point in Greek mythology. Which is interesting because these gods loved to Anyway, the game is a vertical shooter, and while it may not look like much nowadays, it was at the time an amazing feat of programming. You see, the MSX1 didn't have any hardware support for scrolling, so any scrolling had to be somehow cheated. Luckily, most 8 and 16-bit era background graphics weren't drawn using bitmaps, but tile maps. The idea was to divide all your graphics into different tiles of various sizes, typically 8 by 8 or 16 by 16 pixels. By doing that, you could dynamically create an entire map, and by simply repositioning the sprite or tiles by 8 or 16 pixels every chosen frame, you could create the illusion of a scrolling. A choppy scrolling, but a scrolling nonetheless. In fact, by doing things this way, a clever programmer could save a lot of processing power by choosing which tiles were going to scroll and which tiles were going to stay fixed. The other notable prowess were the presence of shadows on your characters and enemies. Now, while this doesn't present much difficulty with ground-based sprites, you just make the shadow part of the sprite, it's a lot more tricky when it comes to air-based sprites, where there's a huge gap between the sprites and its shadow. It's impressive because the MSX1 had a limit of 4 sprites per scanline, and any more than that and things would start flickering quite bad. NES users will know what I mean. But these shadows didn't seem to add any extra pressure on this limit, so I'm not sure exactly how they did it, but I remember it just blew my mind when I got the game back then, because I digress. I feel I'm digressing. Am I digressing? Yeah, I feel I'm digressing a lot here. Blocks are spread out throughout the level. Shooting them a few times will reveal various bonuses in true Konami fashion. Some bonuses will allow you to destroy enemies untouched or freeze time. Some rare ones will also give you an extra life, however these are pretty rare and hard to get. Some blocks are even invisible and other will, once revealed, impede your way. Watch out for these though, and gaps in the landscape, as Popolon can also get killed if the scrolling catches up with him. Interestingly though, your enemies can walk right through them. Yeah, that's Greek mythology for you. Every now and then, so-called crystals will fall from Olympia to help you on your quests. The power crystals can provide invisibility or the ability to destroy your enemies untouched. Does that remind you of something? They can also provide you with much needed charged shield against enemy bullets. The shield will disappear after a few hits though, so be careful not to overuse it. The weapon crystals will allow you to change and upgrade your weapon. You start with 1 arrow shots, which can be upgraded to 2 arrows. You can also upgrade to a boomerang or a 3-direction ball. There's also knives or flame arrows that will pierce through enemies. Now, it is argued that each weapon serves a specific purpose in the game, but in practice I find that it's more a case of personal style. The knives are fast but on the weak side. They will however dispatch small enemies quickly, reducing the amount of on-screen threat. The flame arrows can plow through an entire line of enemies in one shot. The 3-directional fireballs are, well, useless in my opinion, or well, maybe I never figured out how to use them, but I died a lot with these. My personal favorite though are the boomerangs. They have the added bonus of being able to hit on their way back for double damage. It brings the game an element of elegance, class and finesse that is strongly lacking. Also, you'll die a lot with the boomerangs. In fact, you'll die a lot in this game, period. This is a Konami shooter, and in true Konami fashion, this is a one-hit death game. No energy bar, no second chance. You can get a shield, but it's only for enemy bullets. Enemies will kill you if they touch you. It's even mentioned on the box, for experts only. This is a game adventure of super high level difficulty. So you've been warned. Although I must say I don't find it nearly as hard as the Galius series. If you die, you will lose all your power-ups, but you can actually continue with a fighting chance of beating the game and rebuild all your power-up. The graphics were simple but effective, and I loved these columns and the shadow effect on them. Every level has a different color scheme associated with it, and if it's nothing spectacular, it kind of works for me, although it can seem a bit repetitive if we play it with modern expectations. But that's one thing we should never do when playing retro games, right? The music is, simply put, epic. I mean, it's awesome. This is one of the finest piece of 8-bit in-game music ever composed, in my opinion. Then again, I say that about a lot of MSX tunes, but I love this one. It literally lifts the game to another level of epicness. We decided that was a word. And I honestly think the game owes a lot of its appeal to the music alone. Not to say that this is not a good game to start with. You can't turn a game around by forcing epic music on it. But this is just all shades of awesome. Just listen to this. The end of each level is the traditional end level boss. Some have roots in Greek mythology, others are a bit more loosely related. I never found these very hard, but this section used to terrify me. The music would change along with the hit sounds, and they had that weird feeling. They were also much larger than regular enemies, and while not very challenging at all, I often found myself frozen in anguish in front of an unknown end boss and just dying. Stupidly dying. In truth, they're quite easy to beat even without relying on learning their pattern, but it went to show that raising difficulty could also be achieved by slight changes in the background elements like the music and sounds, as opposed to brute increase in enemy damage or crazy boss patterns. In 2005, Amusement Factory released Knightmare Gold. It patches into the existing ROM to upgrade the game to MSX2 standards, improving on the scrolling and graphics. They also released some enhanced music for the game. It's an amazing enthusiast effort worth checking out. It doesn't add much in terms of gameplay experience though, and I still prefer the original version, but that's a matter of taste, and it's a great project overall. In 2013, a complete remake for PC was started, although I'm not sure where it's at now. It looks promising, although I'm not sure I like the art direction. It's straying too far from the Greek mythology for my taste. But that's again a case of personal preference. It's something I'll definitely check out when or if it comes out. There was also a DOS remake, and while the scrolling was a lot better, it just looks... well, yeah, this goes to show that higher technical specs are... And there's no music either, it's a... shut up! Yeah, sorry about that. Anyway, don't bother. Knightmare also had 2 official Konami sequels, namely Maze of Galius and Shalom. They are, however, very different games and deserves entire episodes, so I won't talk any more about them. Yet. I remember playing this game around the time it came out and being just blown away by it. The music, the gameplay, the ideas explored, and the fact that it was heavily ingrained with Greek mythology, which I happened to be reading a lot of at the time. Everything was so well balanced that even though the game was quite hard to beat, it was still compelling and kept drawing me back in after each game over. So go check out Knightmare.